people, looking down their nose at what I was doing. And it was starting to have an effect on me. It was bothering me until I met Waylon Jennings.
We are in here for a very special podcast. In here with Travis Tritt. Travis, thank you for inviting us out to your beautiful place. I mean, we rolled in. I didn't even see the house yet. I said, this driveway's incredible. Didn't I, Grayson?
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here, man. Thank you so much. As I've told you before, I love what you do, and especially the bringing back the history of so many stories that a lot of people don't know about country music, and I just think it's wonderful.
Well, I'm grateful to be here with you because I think we share that sentiment. Me, you guys like Marty Stuart, who we were just talking about off camera, realize the importance of knowing where you came from and what you're doing. And country music just has such a rich history, and it's so important to know and learn from the people who came before. And early on in your career, you was right there with them, with Hank and Waylon, and you had that reverence for the past, and that it sadly seems like a lot of artists today, they don't have that same passion.
It is sad to see that. Just about everybody from my era, they looked up to and revered the people that came before them. And I think somebody said one time, in order to know where you're going, you have to know where you've been. And I think that's very much true, especially in the country music world.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to kind of walk through the years with folks.
Sure.
We were just talking about how I did with Dickie. We started at the beginning and walked forward. How did you get your start in music?
I have been singing my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
I started out as a kid singing in what was referred to as children's church.
Yeah.
At about 5 years old, maybe 4 or 5. I would always, the first record I ever got in my life was a Roger Miller album.
Yeah.
When I was just a kid. And that's when King of the Road was a big, big hit for him. And I realized at the early age of like 3 that I could snap my fingers.
Yeah.
And so I would walk around, and if people would come up to us in a grocery store or, Sears or someplace, people would say, hey, sing King of the Road for me. And I would just break right into it, start singing for people. And they'd give me like a quarter or,
here's a quarter.
Yeah, there you go. And I thought, man, I can make money doing this. This is awesome. And I never really, I've been singing all my life, but never really thought about pursuing it as a career until I was in my, mid-20s.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I walked into a little club one night that was pretty close to my house, and there was one guy up on stage singing and had a guitar, and he had a little drum machine. And I sat there and listened to that guy for, 3 or 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, man, I could do that.
Yeah.
I could do that.
Yeah.
And so later on, a year or so later, when he was leaving that gig to go to Nashville to make his first album, I went to the club owner and I said, hey, can I have that gig? He said, well, I don't know. Let's give it a try. You come in and play one night and let's see what happens. And that sort of kicked it off. And I was still working for a heating and air conditioning wholesale company at the time. And I started realizing very soon after that I was having more fun on my night job than I was on my day job.
Mm.
And oddly enough, I was making more money. So after doing that for a period of time, I finally went to my boss and I said, I love this job, but I really love the music and I'd like to pursue it. I don't know what's going to happen with it, but if I try that and it falls flat on its face, will you hire me back here so I've got a steady income? He said, absolutely. You're welcome to come back here anytime you want to. So I left the heating and air conditioning wholesale job and started playing music and basically never looked back.
Yeah. Who was some of the albums that you had that you listened to when you was young that were kind of influences for you?
Everybody from bluegrass music. I loved my uncle used to take me to bluegrass festivals when I was just 6, 7, 8. He'd take me every year. And we'd go to bluegrass festivals. We'd go to like 3 or 4 of them in a year. And man, I just loved that. So I had all the, Flat and Scruggs records and Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys and all that stuff when I was a kid. And then when I got into my teens in the 70s, I still loved country music, but I really, really loved all this, what they referred to as Southern rock now. Everybody from Leonard Skinner, the Allman Brothers, people like that. I discovered them, Marshall Tucker Band, Charlie Daniels. I discovered them late.
Right.
Their music had been out for years, before I ever really discovered them. But there was something about that music that just turned me on. I loved it.
Yeah.
And then all the country music, stars of not only that time period, but that had come before, people like Hank Snow and, all those guys. I just loved it. I loved everything about it. And then, of course, the gospel music, which I grew up singing in church as a kid, all of those Southern gospel quartets, like Blackwood Brothers and, people like that. I had all those records. And then I found out later on that one of my biggest heroes, Elvis, that's how he got started as well. So, it was just sort of a culmination of all of this different music that I was growing up listening to that in some way played a major role in what I ended up sounding like when I sang. Ray Charles, one of my biggest heroes. I remember hearing Ray Charles music. We were in my dad had a 64 Pontiac Bonneville car, and that was his pride and joy. And I remember we were somewhere and the radio started playing a Ray Charles song from his country album, Modern Sounds of Country Music.
Yeah.
And I heard that for the first time, and the album had been out for a while, but that was my first time hearing it. And man, it just turned me on so much. I ran home. As soon as we got back, I ran into my bedroom, which was my recording studio at the time. And I grabbed my guitar and just wanted to see if I could sing like that with all those curls and all that soul that he put into it. So, I would say to this day, a large part of what comes out of my mouth when I sing is due to listening to people like Ray Charles when I was a kid and listening to all those old gospel singers.
Yeah, yeah.
I love that stuff, man.
Yeah. So you started kind of playing in clubs when you got a little older. A lot of people see folks pop onto the scene, and I hate the term overnight success.
Yeah.
Because they don't see all the years of how many years was that for you?
I used to tell people back then, I said, I'm an overnight success that took 10 years to happen.
Yeah.
Because I started playing, and I was fortunate, really, because I started playing in clubs part-time when I think that was like 82, maybe something like that. It was in 1982, 1983, somewhere in that neighborhood. And I got signed to the very first record label that I was presented to, which was Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
And I got signed to them. I got signed in 87 or 88, but I didn't release my first single with them until August of 89. And so I had been talking with Warner Brothers. They had been looking at me really hard for several years before they ever signed me.
Yeah.
And then after they signed me, it wasn't an instantaneous deal. All the people that I was seeing in Nashville at the time that were getting signed to a record label deal in the late 80s, they were getting signed to a full album deal. And I wasn't that lucky. Back in those days, Warner Brothers, everybody that they signed, that included Randy Travis and all Highway 101, all the people that they ended up signing, they signed them to a 3 singles deal. And that was their way of sort of testing the waters and finding out if people were going to work or not.
Right.
And so they basically told me up front, they said, we're going to sign you to a 3 singles deal, and we're going to cut 3 singles on you, and we're going to release them. And if one of those 3 singles doesn't go top 10, you're done. You're out. So I was praying like crazy in August of 89 when we released Country Club. And fortunately, that first song, it barely made it to number 9 on the Billboard charts.
Yeah.
And they immediately came back and said, okay, we're going to have to go in now and cut an album. And we rushed back in and cut the first album, Country Club, in the end of 1989 on into 1990.
Yeah.
And then released it in the spring of 1990.
Yeah.
And it was off to the races.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about the influences you had, guys like Ray Charles and Skinner and stuff that helped you form your sound. And when I was talking to Randy Travis the other day, we talked about how the 80s was a weird time in country music because you're coming off the urban cowboy movement.
Right.
And then Randy kind of came along and brought in like true hardcore traditional stuff. Did you face any kind of, people pushing you back on the Southern rock outlaw sound that you brought on the scene?
Oh man, they hated it. Well, my first experience talking with Jim Ed Norman at Warner Brothers, and I went in and sat down and talked with him when he told me that they were going to sign me to a 3 singles deal. And he said, I'll be honest with you, I don't know what to do with you. Now, the way I ended up there in the first place, the guy that really sort of discovered me was a guy by the name of Danny Davenport, who worked for Warner Brothers Records in Marietta, Georgia. He was the regional promotion man for all of the pop stuff, the rock stuff that they were releasing at the time. And the way that I met him, back in that time frame in the mid 80s, they had Marlboro Talent Contest.
Yeah.
And the Marlboro Talent Roundup, Marlboro Cigarettes sponsored this talent roundup. And it was done in regions all around the country. And in order to qualify, in order to get on that competition, you had to send them a professionally recorded tape of at least 3 songs. And they preferred that at least one of them be something that you wrote on your own. And I really wanted to be a part of that competition, because if you won, you get to open for their Marlboro Talent tours that at the time they had people like Ronnie Millsap, the Judds, Exile, all these people. And if you won, you get to open for those people on tour. And so I really wanted to be a part of that, but I had no money and I had no way of making a recording in a professional studio. I didn't even know anybody that owned a professional studio. And a friend of mine who was an electrician came up to me one night and said, I told him what I wanted to do. And he said, I am wiring a studio for a guy right now. He said, it's just a garage studio, but he's doing it at his house. And he said, I'll bet you that if I went and talked to him and told him what you wanted to do, that he would just let you come in and record for free. I said, man, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
So we go over to this guy's house. It's Danny Davenport's house. We walk into his garage studio, and all on the walls are gold and platinum records from the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, Prince, Rod Stewart, ZZ Top, Hank Williams Jr., all these gold and platinum albums. And I looked at my friend Randy and I said, what does this guy do? He said, he works for Warner Brothers Records. I said, and we're recording in his studio? He said, absolutely. So I go behind the glass and I just take my guitar and I start recording. And in the middle of the second song, Danny Davenport walked in. I didn't know him from Adam's House Cat. Walks in and sits down on the other side of the glass and listened to me do my 3 songs. And when it was over, he came up and grabbed me and hugged my neck and picked me up and said, where have you been all my life? And we started recording. He said, I think you need to do an album. Just something to have, something to sell at your shows, and just something to get out there. And so we recorded over the next year and a half. It took us a year and a half to record this album because nobody knew what they were doing. Nobody knew. We didn't know how to run the equipment. We didn't know how to do anything. We were learning as we went.
Yeah.
And so we finished that album about a year and a half later. And unbeknownst to me, he took those tapes and flew to the home office of Warner Brothers Records in Burbank, California, and played my album for Lenny Waronker and Mo Austin, who were the president and vice president of Warner Brothers Records in California.
Yeah.
And they immediately said, we'll sign him right now. We'll sign him right now. But he's obviously a country guy. So, Danny, you need to take these tapes back to Nashville and play them for Jim Ed Norman at Warner Brothers Records. And so he did that the next day. And for whatever reason, Jim Ed just didn't hear it. None of the people at the Nashville office heard it. And which is really strange, because Jim Ed Norman said at the time, he told me, he said, I just don't know what to do with you, because that Southern rock thing that you're doing, that's kind of dead and gone. And the funny thing about that was, he said that to me at a time when the biggest artist that they had on Warner Brothers Nashville was Hank Williams Jr. That was in his heyday.
Yeah.
In the late 80s. And so I couldn't understand why he thought that was going to be a problem for me. But he signed me to that 3 singles deal, and I released, the first 3 singles that I released were Country Club, which was pretty straight down the pike, traditional country music. I released Help Me Hold On was my second single, and then I'm Gonna Be Somebody was my third. And all three of those songs were pretty much, straight down the pike country music. And when I got to that fourth single, I released Put Some Drive in Your Country.
Mm-hmm.
And it had all those hard rock, Southern rock electric guitars on it. Radio at the time, and it sounds funny saying it now, because radio at the time absolutely hated it. They were not going to allow anybody to come in and do that Southern rock thing that Hank Jr. had basically gotten by with.
Mm-hmm.
He was the only one that I knew of that was getting by with getting played on country radio at the time.
Yeah.
And man, that single, the first single was Country Club, went to number 9. Second single went to number 1, Help Me Hold On. And the third single went to number 1 as well, which was I'm Gonna Be Somebody. Got to that fourth one, and man, radio stations hated it. Wouldn't play it. My record label hated it. But the funny thing about it was that song introduced me to a whole new audience that wasn't there for the first 3 singles. People that loved Hank Jr. and loved Charlie Daniels and loved the Marshall Tucker Band and loved Leonard Skinner. They were discovering me all of a sudden. And even though the song itself didn't do that well at country radio, it was getting played on some rock stations around 96 Rock in Atlanta played it.
Yeah.
There were other rock stations that were starting to play it, and not a lot, but enough to where even though that song was like dying on the charts very quickly, my album sales at that particular time went through the roof. And they couldn't understand it at Warner Brothers. They couldn't figure out what's happening. But I knew what was happening.
Yeah.
Because I realized that all these people that loved the same kind of stuff that I did, that Southern rock, country rock stuff that Hank Jr. and all these other people were doing, they were discovering me for the first time.
Yeah.
And so we made it a point to, from that point on, and also the blues stuff too. I loved that music growing up. So we made it a point on every album to include 2 or 3 just rockers, and 2 or 3 blues tunes, so that, people that part of my audience could be fed what they were wanting to hear. And that's where it sort of took off.
Yeah. Did you feel any sort of, like animosity towards Nashville at the time? Because I know I would have.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%. The thing about Nashville, what they've always done, and I didn't even realize it when it was happening to me at the beginning, but what they do is they were coming to see me play in clubs, and they would see I was playing Monday through Saturday, Monday through Friday, 8 p.m. till 2 a.m., and then on Saturday it was 8 p.m. till 3 or 4 a.m. And they were coming to watch me, and they would sit there and watch me do everything that I did for that from 8 to 2.
Yeah.
And man, they said, these A&R representatives, they would say, man, we love what you do. We love what you do. And then when I came to Nashville to start recording for Warner Brothers, oh, we don't want you to do that. We want you to do this. And what they were doing, they were trying to mold me into something that I wasn't really comfortable with. And I was too stupid at the time to not be able to restrain myself. I told them straight up what I thought. And I told them, I said, look, here's the deal. I know that my audience what they will and will not accept from me, because I've been playing every night of the week for years.
Yeah.
And for some reason or another, I discovered early on that if I got up on stage and played a Hank Jr. song or a Marshall Tucker band tune or a Charlie Daniels song or whatever, people would accept that from me.
Yeah.
But if I did, even though it was maybe a number one single at the time, if I did a George Strait song, people hated it from me.
Yeah. Yeah.
That wasn't what they wanted to hear. And from me.
Right.
Not that it wasn't popular.
Right.
I mean, that stuff in Texas at the time and any place else in the country, really, was, man, that's all they wanted to hear. But for some reason or another, George Strait or Conway Twitty or anybody else that was more straight ahead country, from me, they just didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to hear it. And so I told the people at Warner Brothers, I said, look, I think I know my audience a whole lot better than you folks do.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm telling you right now, they're not going to accept this kind of stuff that you want me to cut. They're not going to accept that kind of stuff from me.
Right.
And so we butted heads tremendously. And I realized at that time, too, that was what they were trying to do with so many of the other artists that I had met and become friends with. They were trying to change them in some way.
Yeah.
Make them do something different. And I just rebelled against it 100% from the very beginning. And I think that's one of the reasons why I sort of developed this. I'm recording in Nashville. I'm working in Nashville, but I'm an outsider. Yeah. And I didn't feel like they were ever going to let me in.
Yeah.
To that group. It was kind of like a good old boys club, you know?
Yeah.
And they just weren't going to let me in.
Yeah.
And I felt the same way about the Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah.
First time I ever played the Grand Ole Opry, of course, I had hair down to, about right here. Mm-hmm. And I went, they invited me to play the Grand Ole Opry. And I loved the Grand Ole Opry. I grew up listening to it with my dad when I was just a kid. We would sit in our driveway or in our front yard on Saturday nights if the weather permitted, and we'd pull out these Kmart lounge chairs, and my dad would bring a little radio outside, and on his way home from work, because he worked 6 days a week too, and on his way home from work on Saturday nights, he would stop off and he would buy a 12-pack of Budweiser beer for himself, and he'd buy me several Coca-Colas in the little green glass bottles.
Yeah, yeah.
And he would buy some, a big sack full of roasted peanuts. And we would sit outside on Saturday nights in our driveway or in our front yard and eating those roasted peanuts, listening to the Grand Ole Opry on WSM live from Nashville, Tennessee. And then, so I grew up on the Opry.
Right.
But I never thought, once again, it's in Nashville.
Yeah.
I never thought they would let me in.
Yeah.
And the first time I went to the Grand Ole Opry, I was backstage in one of those little dressing rooms. And my band and I, we were playing bluegrass, which is what we would typically play if we were going down the road in the tour bus. We'd play bluegrass. And I was playing banjo. And we're in the middle of playing some song, and I felt a hand on my shoulder. And a voice whispered in my ear and said, "Can you play Cripple Creek on that banjo, son?" I turned around and looked, and it was Mr. Roy Acuff. And I about lost it.
Yeah.
This is one of my heroes. But I realized right then and there, even with my long hair and all that other stuff, Mr. Acuff loved me.
Yeah.
And I think he was the primary reason that I got invited back numerous times. And I think he's also the reason why I was invited to be a member of the Grand Ole Opry in 1992.
Wow.
At the very beginning.
Yeah. Well, you know, I personally think that there's still a little bit of that snubbing coming from Nashville towards you. I think about you and Johnny Horton a lot. I compare the two of you to people a lot. I say, you know, Johnny didn't really do the Nashville thing. He was hot in Shreveport.
Oh, huge.
And so he stayed in Shreveport. He didn't need Nashville.
Exactly.
And guess what? He's not in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And you're not in the Hall of Fame. And not taken away from anybody who's been inducted in the past several years, because I think all those guys and girls deserve those places. But I think you should have been in.
Well, thank you.
Long ago.
You know, it's a dream. It's a milestone for sure. But once again, I look back at my heroes, you know, and I don't think they really cared.
Yeah.
You know, about what anybody thought in Nashville. They were the kind of people that they were going to do whatever they knew their audience wanted. And to hell with the people in Nashville, you know, they didn't care. And I remember at the very early stages, when I came out with Put Some Drive in Your Country as that fourth single, man, they started lighting me up. They loved me for those first three singles.
Yeah.
You know, everybody, or at least they seemed to.
Yeah.
But man, when that song hit, everybody, all these people, all these writers for these country music magazines, and all these disc jockeys on country radio stations, man, I would hear it. I would hear it live or read it. They started trashing me every way they possibly could. And they called me all these different names. They said, well, he's a rebel. He's a rebel. He's a nonconformist. He is an outsider, which was true. And then they finally found the one that they really stuck on. They said, oh, I know what he is. He's an outlaw. And man, when they started, and they weren't saying it in a good way. And when they hit me with that, man, I started feeling like I was being challenged. Every interview I would sit down and do, well, how does it feel to be an outlaw in the country music industry? I said, man, I was thinking in my head, I'm not trying to be an outlaw. I'm not trying to be anything. I'm just doing the kind of music that I love.
Right.
And trying to pay tribute to the people that influenced me to do that kind of music. And I started feeling this real heavy pushback, and people, you know, looking down their nose at what I was doing.
Yeah.
And it was starting to, I won't say depressed, but it was starting to have an effect on me. I was starting to carry this real heavy chip on my shoulder. And it was bothering me until I met Waylon Jennings. And I met Waylon Jennings. We were doing a show at the Omni in Atlanta. Jerry Glanville was the coach of the Atlanta Falcons football team at that time. And he was doing a benefit, and he and I had become really good friends. And he told me, he said, I'm going to do a benefit at the Omni in Atlanta. He said, I'm going to get Waylon Jennings to headline it. He said, I know you're a big Waylon fan. He said, and I'm going to get you to open the show for Waylon. Man, my heart just about jumped out of my chest. I was so thrilled. And so that concert night finally came around, and Jerry came up to me and he said, would you like to meet Waylon? And I said, would I ever? And so we went back. It was a whole group of us. Zell Miller was the governor of Georgia at the time.
Yeah.
He went back with us. All these different people. There was like 15 people. Went back, met Waylon, took pictures, and everything was just fantastic. And I was so thrilled to get a chance to meet him. Waylon said, I understand you like a lot of the stuff I do. I said, absolutely I do. He said, would you come out and sing a song with me tonight? Man, I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I said, absolutely I will. So we chatted for, I don't know, 10 minutes, all of us. And as we're getting ready to walk out of the room, somehow or another, I'm the last person in line to leave. And I went over and we all left together. And I had my hand on the door. I'm holding the door open and I'm getting ready to walk out. And over my shoulder, I hear, hey, Hoss. Turn around and look. Talking to me? Yeah, you. Come here a minute. I want to talk to you. Leave everybody else outside. I want to talk to you for a second. So I come back in. Now it's just me and Waylon.
Yeah.
And I'm shaking. I'm so nervous.
Yeah.
And he said, there was a chair in the dressing room. He said, sit down in that chair. He said, he's sitting in the dressing rooms. They had those, almost like a little table right in front of the lights and the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the mirror had all the big light bulbs around it. And he's sitting on that desk or whatever you want to call it, that shelf in front of those mirrors. And I'm sitting there lower to the ground. And he just starts saying, I've been watching you. He said, I really like what you do. He said, but I've been hearing the things that they're saying about you. And he said, just remember one thing. Every single thing that they're saying about you right now is exactly what they said about me and what they said about Johnny Cash and what they said about Willie Nelson and a whole bunch of other people.
Mm.
He just went down the list. Chris Christopherson.
Yeah.
David Allen Coe, Hank Jr., all these different people. He said, let me ask you a question. Are you still selling good tickets? I said, yes, sir. I said, every single show I'm doing is sold out. Great. How your albums doing? I said, knock on wood, every album that we've done so far has gone gold and then platinum or better.
Yeah.
He said, well, there you go. He said, that's all that matters. He said, the people that work for a living, which are those people that are going out and buying your records. He said, those people in Nashville that are saying all those nasty things about you, they don't pay a dime for music.
Yeah.
Not a dime. He said, the people that count are the people that work 40, 50, 60 hours a week to put food on the table for their families and put a roof over their head. And those same people are willing to go out and buy your records every time you release new product. And they're also the same people that are willing to shell out some money every time that you come and play close to where they live.
Yeah.
To come see you play live.
Right.
He said, so those are the only people that count. To hell with all the rest of those people in Nashville. And man, when he said that, it was just like lifting a big pile of bricks off of my shoulders.
Oh, I'd imagine.
Because I realized as I thought about it more and more, he's exactly right.
Yeah.
Don't worry about what those people in Nashville tell you or what they think about you, you're not trying to impress them anyway. The people you're trying to impress are the ticket buyers and the album buyers.
Yeah.
So that really changed my whole approach to Nashville at that point. Was I was going to do things my own way, the way that Waylon did, and the way that Hank Jr. did, and the way that all my heroes did. I was going to do things my own way, and it just kept working out. It just kept working out. The hits kept coming, and we still kept having success in spite of all of those people.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I really felt like I was the one getting the last laugh.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, for sure. 100%. Yeah, talking about all that, there was a big headline in the news last week, I guess it was, and I'm not going to mention their names, but I'm sure a lot of folks saw it. And no shade to these people. I think that everybody in the music industry is just doing what they think is right for them and their careers. But it was two musicians who released a song on the same day that sounded exactly the same. It sounded like the exact same song, and it made headlines because it sounded so much alike. And I was thinking, you know, if you really know the history of country music, Nashville has always done this.
They have.
Since Hank Williams died, they've done this cookie cutter. Once they find something that works, they drive it into the ground until people's tired of it, and then they find the next thing. And I've talked to some younger artists about this, like, you can go to Nashville and do the cookie cutter thing and have a successful career, maybe.
Yep.
And but are they going to remember you? Or are they going to remember the guy who started it, the trendsetter? And you're a trendsetter, and Waylon was it. They tried to do it with Waylon, put him in a suit and tie and 100%. The Nashville sound. It's the trendsetters who get remembered.
Well, you know, I mean, that, unfortunately, that is true.
Yeah.
Nashville has always done it. They did that to me. You know, they bring you to Nashville, they sign you to a record label deal, and then they, you know, if you don't have any experience, all I was wanting to do was just make records.
Yeah.
And, you know, because I love music.
Yeah.
They try to tell you, and they do tell you, look, we know how to make you successful. You have to follow our plan. Do it exactly as we tell you. Don't color outside the lines. That's a no-no. If you'll do exactly what we tell you, you'll be successful. If you don't do what we tell you, you will fail. And that's exactly what they do. They try to pretend like they have a crystal ball and they know what everybody is going to do. But it took me years to realize these people don't have a clue.
Yeah.
They don't have a clue about what people like. People want to hear. And not having your finger on the pulse of the people is what Nashville has been missing. And also what they fail to incentivize with people. They try to, if you come in and you want to do something different, oh, no, we don't want that. And if you think about the successes of so many people, look at how many people turned down Randy Travis.
Yeah.
How many people passed on him in Nashville.
Yeah.
Look at how many people passed on Garth Brooks, or you can name 100 of them.
Yeah.
Before they finally ended up getting signed. And so I love the originality. You know, it takes somebody that's original. I remember one of the first co-writes that I ever did, and with more than one person. Most of the stuff that I wrote in the early days, I either wrote it by myself or I wrote it with one person. And so the first co-write that I did, where there was I think there were 3 of us, we did it over at the old Tree Publishing studios. And I walk in this room, I sit down with, I can't even remember who the writers were, but I'm sitting down with two other writers, first time I'd ever written with them. And we're just getting to know each other. We're just talking, just getting ready to pick guitars up and start working on ideas. And one of the people that worked at Tree Publishing comes busting through the door. He says, "Okay, guys, here's what we need to do today. We need a song. I want you to write me 4 or 5 songs about green tractors." What? And it wasn't until after we left that I realized John Deere Green from Joe Diffie was going up the charts big at that time. And I think Kenny Chesney had just had a big hit with She Thinks My Tractor's Sexy. So that was their whole thing. That's what we're going to write about today, boys. And I thought, man, isn't that indicative of exactly what Nashville has always tried to do? Chasing their tail, basically.
Yeah.
You know, you find something that works, and all of a sudden, everything new has got to sound just like that. And that's one of the biggest reasons I think I resisted the urge to move to Nashville. Because so many of the people that I grew up listening to that never went to Nashville, you know, people like Buck Owens and Merle Haggard, and even Alabama, the group Alabama, they never really, they kept their homes in, you know, Fort Payne,
right,
Alabama. And they would go and work in Nashville, and some of them had offices there. But the fact is, that was never home for them. And I think it kept their music fresh.
Yeah.
Because they weren't trying to copy what somebody else was doing.
Yeah.
They were just doing what they felt. And that's the biggest thing I see it that I warned my children about in Nashville. I said, if they offer for you to move to Nashville, don't. Or L.A., or they offered all those things to me at the very beginning. Oh, you need to be in L.A. or you need to be in Nashville. Well, I'm close enough to Nashville. You know, Delta's ready when I am. I can go to Nashville and be there in a 1-hour flight, or I can drive up there and be there in 3.5 hours if I need to go work. But I don't want to be in a fishbowl around all these other people, because before long, if I'm exposed to nothing but that, we'll all start sounding exactly the same.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that. And so it worked out.
Yeah.
But it was a tough struggle there for a while.
Yeah.
You know, pushing back against the powers that be in Nashville. They don't like that.
Yeah. But it worked out. It worked out big time for not just you, but a lot of different people, Waylon and Hank and all those guys. What was it like when you finally got that break and you released those first few songs and your career just skyrockets? What was kind of going through your head at that time?
It's such a rocket ride. And I just remember just being astounded by what was happening. And it's like being in the middle of a tornado. You're looking around and you're seeing, oh, there goes somebody's house. There goes somebody's car. There goes the cows from the next door neighbor. And you're seeing it go by so fast, it's hard to sort of process all of it.
Right.
And I remember years later, I remember telling a bunch of new artists that were just starting to break in on the scene. I remember telling Gretchen Wilson the first time I ever met her. And I said, I'm going to give you a little piece of advice that I wish I had done back in the day. I said, find somebody in your organization that travels with you every single day and get them to carry a video recorder with them every single minute of everything you do.
Yeah.
Every concert you play, warming up backstage, getting ready to go out, or meeting other people, or being a part of an awards ceremony, or, any of those things. I said, get somebody to record it, because I wish I had. I miss that, because there's so many things happening in those early days, especially.
Yeah.
When a career is just starting to take off. And before you know it, because they're just happening one right after the other.
Yeah.
And before you know it, there'll come a time one day where you'll look back and start trying to remember all of that stuff.
Mm.
And some of it you'll be able to recall, but a lot of it you won't.
Yeah.
And even now, with social media, somebody posted just yesterday, on X, I had forgotten I ever did this song. They posted a thing. I did a tribute to Elvis album with a bunch of different other artists, and they wanted me to do Lottie Miss Claudie. And I recorded that with Don Was, Kenny Arnoff on drums, Reggie Young on guitar, all of these great players, and that we actually did a video for it. I completely forgot about until yesterday when he posted that.
Yeah.
So it's like so many of these different things. It's literally like being in a whirlwind, and it's all happening so fast. And to me, it was like it's a dream come true. I mean, it makes you extremely happy, but at the time too, I was so focused on, being out on the road and doing shows. And then when you come off the road, you got to do writing, go back in and start writing again. And then when you're not writing, or you're not in the studio, or you're not doing shows, then you're doing press tours.
Yeah.
So, man, it's like constant.
Yeah.
The first 2 years that I was in the business, in 1990 and 1991, I figured it up one day, and I was doing 200 and something shows a year.
Wow.
And then doing the recordings. I figured it up. The first 2 years, I spent a total in those first 2 years of 2 weeks each year at home with nothing to do. And no 2 days were ever together.
Wow.
14 days out of the year that I wasn't busy working, doing something, where I just got to come home and relax.
That's crazy.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
And you realize, man, but that's what you had to do.
Yeah.
In order to maximize all of this attention that you're finally getting. And it'll wear on you.
Yeah.
It wore on me.
Bobby Braddock did that. He didn't have a video camera, but he told me he has like dozens of those composition notebooks, and every day wrote down what he did that day for years.
Like a journal?
Mm-hmm.
Man.
He journaled and he's got stacks of composition notebooks, and he went back through all of them and wrote his book, and Life on Nashville's Music Row, which is fantastic.
Man, that's incredible. Well, that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
Because once again, you think about all these different things that have happened, and it's really, I mean, it's a country boy's dream to have all those things happen, especially growing up the way that I did, because, I had a love for music my whole life. But when I started playing those clubs and stuff, my dad was constantly telling me, son, when are you going to go get a real job? And my dad, one of his favorite sayings was, son, you have got a better chance of being president of the United States than you do of being a country music star. And he just constantly, discouraged me. Even when I was playing and singing in church, my mother used to make sure that I was in church every single time the doors were open. So I was playing and singing in church my whole life. And my dad, I remember him telling it, it's clear as day. He would tell my mother, "You're going to ruin that boy." What do you mean? You're going to ruin that boy. He's going to grow up. He's playing and singing in church. And he said, everybody, of course, my dad grew up, back in the Depression era.
Right.
On a farm.
Right.
Where they grew everything that they ate. And back when nobody had any money.
Yeah.
But he said, everybody I ever knew in my entire life that played a guitar and sang were the people that were too lazy to work. And every one of them ended up as a drunk, and every one of them ended up with no money, broke, playing down in some honky-tonk someplace for chicken feed. And he said, that's exactly where he's going to end up if you keep taking him and letting him play in church and sing in church and do all these other things. So you can just imagine, when I started playing clubs and stuff, oh my God, everything that he had predicted, in his opinion, was coming true. And I understand it better now, but I didn't understand it then.
Yeah.
He was just trying to look out for me because he thought I was going to, wind up flat on my face.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, though. I remember when I got my first gold album for Country Club in 1991, I invited my parents to Nashville. I bought them plane tickets to come to Nashville, and I had a limo pick them up at the airport and bring them to the gold record presentation at Warner Brothers. And after that presentation took place, my dad walked up to me and he had tears in his eyes. I get choked up thinking about it. He had tears in his eyes, and he pulled me off to the side and he said, "Son, everything I told you, I realized I was hard on you, but," he said, "everything I told you about the music industry," he said, "I was obviously wrong." He said, "And I'm so proud of you."
Right.
He told me he loved me.
Yeah.
That was one of the first times my dad ever told me he loved me.
Wow.
Was because that was just, it was a different era.
Yeah.
A different time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that, I think, more than anything, that probably made me feel like I had done something pretty spectacular.
Yeah. I think that's a dad thing. Dickie told me that his dad told him to throw a guitar in the Mississippi River. And when my stuff started taking off, I was at my mom and dad's house, and my dad, he always reads the paper. He said, "I saw a good job in the paper you ought to apply for. It's a foreman job, and got benefits and stuff. I think you should do it." And I said, "Dad, I really think this stuff that I'm doing is taking off. I think I can maybe make a career out of it if I go after it." And he said, "Some of that stuff's flash in the pan. And I don't want you to get caught up." And it's just like you said about your dad. He didn't mean it in any kind of a mean way. He was just looking out for his son.
Absolutely.
He wanted me to take the safe route, which I think most parents want for their kids. But
yep, that's it.
As a kid, you're thinking, "I got one life to live, and I want to go for it."
Absolutely. And that's one of the things when my son Tristan, that I know you talked to a few weeks ago, when he came to me, I had sent him to school in Arizona to learn how to do basically everything involved with the music business.
Yeah.
From live sound to working in the studio, be an engineer, whatever, is out there. And when he came back and told me that I think I want to pursue the music industry, I think I want to try to be an artist. Do you think I could do that? And I thought right then and there, I thought, I really don't want him to.
Yeah.
Because I know how hard it is, and I know how many rejections you get in this business and how that can weigh on you. But then I thought, I'm the last person in the world to tell somebody not to chase their dream.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what I did. And if I had not have done that, I would be old and in my rocking chair wondering, could I have ever made it? I wonder if I could have made it in the music industry.
Yeah.
And that would have drove me crazy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's one of those things. If you really love it, and I tell people this all the time too, if you're trying to pursue music strictly for the money or the fame, I don't give you much chance at all.
Yeah.
Of having long-lasting success.
Yeah.
You might be, like your dad said, a flash in the pan.
Yeah.
But you're not going to be around very long. You truly, in order to really, really endure all the things that you have to go through to make it in this business, I personally believe you have to love it with every fiber in your being.
Yeah. And
that's what I tell my kids. Do you love it that much?
Yeah.
Because if you don't try it.
Yeah.
But if you really love it that much, go out there and give it every single thing you've got.
Yeah.
Live it, eat it, drink it, live on it.
Yeah. It's funny you said that about thinking about being an old man sitting in the rocker wondering what if I would have. I always tell people there's an old man that lives in my head, and it's me as a 90-year-old man sitting in my deathbed. And anytime I have a big decision, I always think, what would I think sitting in that deathbed?
Yeah.
Would I regret not doing this?
Absolutely.
I don't know if that's a dangerous thing to keep in your head or if it's a good thing, but it's done well for me so far.
Well, it's amazing that a young man like you can have that kind of perspective, because most people your age, they don't think that far ahead.
Yeah.
But that's just, I call it country boy wisdom,
Yeah.
And the thing is, in life, as people, we have a wonderful college course instruction manual that's happening all around us of watching, if you'll pay attention to it, watch other people's mistakes. Watch what other people do that causes them major problems later on down the road. And it is a tremendous course that all you have to do is just pay attention. Pay attention. Watch what's going on with these other people, and watch what doing certain things, watch the positive and watch the negative. I got involved back in when I was starting to play clubs and stuff back in the day. That was when cocaine had first really come on the scene. It was everywhere.
Yeah.
It was everywhere. And in those biker bars and pool halls and places that I was playing, man, it was all over the place.
Right.
And the first time I got introduced to that was I had a little goldfish bowl on my stage for people to put tips in. If you want me to play a certain song for you. And at that time, I was a human jukebox anyway. I wasn't playing any of my stuff. I'm playing everybody else's hits.
Yeah.
If you want me to play something for you, come up, put, few dollars in the tip jar, and I'll play it for you. And I came off stage in one of those biker bars one night, and some dude came up to me and said, hey, could you play such and such song on the next set?
Mm-hmm.
And he put his hand out like he was going to shake my hand. And so I went to shake his hand, and he put a little packet of cocaine in my hand. That was my tip. And it was everywhere back then.
Mm.
And so I was doing that all through the club days in order to be able to stay up and drive all night, to get from one place to the next.
Yeah.
You might have a show tonight, or for several weeks, you might have a show in Marietta, Georgia, and then you have to go to Fort Worth, Texas for several weeks. And so, man, in order to be able to make those long drives, and, you need something to keep you up.
Yeah.
I was doing the cocaine thing way too much.
Yeah.
And what made me realize that you're going to have to stop that was watching some other people. I knew some other people that had come up right about the same time that I did, that it just destroyed their lives.
Yeah.
And I was brushing my teeth in the mirror one day after being up for about 3 days, and it just hit me all of a sudden. It's like, what on earth are you doing?
Yeah.
Every single dream that you ever had about being in the music industry has come true for you, and you're about to throw that all away for what? And I stopped.
Yeah.
Right then and there. That was the end of it for me.
Wow. Yeah, I saw Waylon talking to Bobby Bear on the Bobby Bear show, and Bobby had asked him how much money were you doing in the heyday?
Yeah.
And Waylon said $1,500 a day, and then he said, but you can't write off drugs on taxes, so really that was about $3,000 a day is what Waylon said.
Absolutely.
My goodness, that's crazy.
Unbelievable. And somebody like Waylon, told me numerous times, he said, man, I have been rich and bankrupt about 3 times in my career so far. It's all of this, up and down. You don't ever know from one day to the next. So the last thing in the world you want to do, what you want to do is try to find the pitfalls by watching other people fall into those pitfalls.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're riding down the road and all of a sudden, way up ahead of you on the highway, a sinkhole opens up and you see all these cars and trucks going into this sinkhole, the first thing you want to do is slam on the brakes.
Yeah.
Don't follow them and do the same stupid things that they did.
Yeah.
Or fall into the same accidents that they did.
Right.
Because you already know how that's going to end up.
Yeah.
So it took me a long time to learn that, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
It took me a long time to learn it. And even in my 60s, I look back on that now and think, man, if I had just been more observant.
Yeah.
How much better things could have been.
Right.
Back in the early days. So that's what I try to encourage, certainly my kids and anybody else that wants to hear my 2 cents of advice.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I try to tell them now.
Well, that's great advice. And speaking of your kids, before we get too far away from that, I do want to say Tristan and Tyler Reese. I haven't really got to sit down and talk to Tyler Reese. I met her, but I haven't got to sit down and talk to her. But I've talked to Tristan a lot. We're buddies now. So
yes, sir.
I think they took a great lesson from you. And if anybody listens to the podcast I did with Tristan, we talked more about authenticity than anything. And I think he got that from you. And I told him that on the podcast. So you get that from your dad, that just stay true to yourself. And that's what I love about Tristan. That's what I've always loved about you. So I'm so excited to see what he does with his career.
I'm excited for him too. And same thing with Tyler Reese. She's very much the same way. But both of them, they understand the importance of doing things your own way and the importance of being different.
Yeah.
You know, being different. And I love that about both of them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great to see them being trailblazers on their own, just like their dad was. I'm so excited about that. But I keep getting a glare in my eyes over here, looking over your shoulder at that chrome guitar that you played at the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
How was that?
Man, it was just one of those unbelievable things. When they first called me and told me that they wanted to do a country music Super Bowl halftime show, that's when, I mean, country music was, as you know, was blowing up at the time.
Yes.
You know, Class of '89 had already hit, and it was blowing up, going crazy. So when they asked me to be a part of that, I thought, man, this is going to be really cool. And it wasn't until we were getting ready to walk out on the field, and I can't remember who it was exactly. It was somebody that worked for the television network. Somebody said, right before we're getting ready to walk out there, somebody walked by and said, "Don't be nervous now. You're only playing in front of about 1 billion people worldwide."
Wow.
Holy smokes. Man. But that was such an incredible show.
Yeah.
And it was so great to be a part of that. I mean, everybody on that show was just fantastic, I thought.
Yeah.
From Winona to Clint Black to Tanya Tucker. And of course, I knew all these people.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, hung out with them. So it was just like old home week, you know, getting a chance to go out there and do that. But it wasn't until years later that I realized the big impact that had on my career. I think everybody's career that was involved with that.
Yeah.
It just took it up another notch.
Right.
It was incredible.
Yeah, it was an incredible performance. A very iconic suit you was wearing out there. One of my favorite pictures
turquoise leather
in the world is the turquoise leather. I gotta ask, was that Manuel that made that?
No, that was there was a lady in New Mexico that owned a company called Gossamer Wings. And I met up with her. She was making some clothes for Randy Travis back in the early 90s. And she was working with some other stuff. I found out later on, though, she did a bunch of leather stuff for Elvis Presley.
Oh, wow.
Back that 69 comeback special that Elvis did, she made some of the leather stuff that he wore on that as well.
Wow.
And so I met her, and she came up with this, I think you'd look great in leather. And, you know, so I just basically hey, it's your ideas, it's your design.
Yeah.
Let's just go with it. And I wanted to be, once again, different.
Yeah.
Than all the rest of the people that were coming out in the late 80s and early 90s.
Yeah.
I wanted to be different. And I had that rock and roll sort of part of me, a part of my background.
Right.
And I wanted to sort of pay tribute to that. So that's where all the leather stuff came from. And of course, playing biker bars and places like that. I mean, that's how everybody dressed. You know, the fringe.
Yeah.
The leather fringe, man. I can't tell you how many times I would see people sitting in my audience.
Yeah.
In those biker bars and stuff that had that kind of stuff on.
Right.
So it just kind of fit, you know, it worked.
Yeah. It was definitely iconic for sure. So we talked a little bit off the camera about Manuel. I know you've had a long relationship with him. He's made a lot of stuff for you. Yes. What a dear friend of mine, and what a legend and a great man.
Oh man, I just love him. He made the first outfit that I ever had made. The first professional outfit that I ever had made was a Manuel. and it was the black leather jacket. It was like a bolero jacket, like this, with the fringe on the sleeves.
Yeah.
And black leather pants, and a turquoise concho belt.
Oh yeah.
And that's in if you go back and find the very first publicity photos that I did for Warner Brothers, that was what I was wearing, was that Manuel suit. I met him at that time. That was before he had moved to Nashville. He was in Los Angeles. I met him for the first time in Los Angeles, and I knew a little bit about the stuff that he had done, but I didn't really know all the things that he had done and all the people he had worked with until I met Marty Stuart, which was sometime later.
Yeah.
And Marty starts telling me about all the outfits that he had made for all these country music stars, and not only country music stars, but rock and roll people. And it just blew me away.
Yeah.
So I couldn't wait to see him again.
Yeah.
To sit down and ask him about all these different things. And I've, much like you, I've sat with Manuel for hours on end.
Yeah.
Just listening to him tell stories and talk about, all these amazing things that happen with amazing artists in all different types of music. I just love that. I'm a history buff anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's no better place to get history about the music industry than sitting down and talking with Manuel.
Yeah, he lived it.
He did. He absolutely did.
So you brought up Marty Stuart. How did you and Marty get connected?
Marty and I met as a result of the song Whiskey Ain't Working.
Yeah.
He had written that song with another songwriter, Ronnie Scaife. They wrote that song with Hank Williams Jr. in mind. And they had pitched it to Hank, and I think they pitched it to several other people. And for whatever reason, nobody else cut it. They pitched it to my producer at the time, which was a guy named Greg Brown. And he brought it to me, and I loved it. And of course, Marty Stuart was playing guitar and singing on the demo. So when we decided to record the song, I did all of the vocals. And then once it was done, my producers came in to me and said, on that lead break in the middle, why don't we get Marty Stuart to come in and play that lead break like he did on the demo? I said, man, I think that's perfect, because he had a style that was, and a sound that was undeniable and recognizable right off the bat. So when Marty came in, I wasn't even at the studio when he came in to record that.
Yeah.
And while he was there, Greg Brown asked him if he would, hey, just try singing that second verse, and let's just see what that does. And then try doing the harmonies with Travis on the choruses. So he did that. And he sent it to me. I said, man, don't change a thing. That is perfect. So we ended up recording it that way. And then later on, we decided we were going to release that as a single.
Yeah.
And if you released a single back in those days, you had to have a video. So Marty Stuart and I met on the set of the Whiskey Ain't Working video. And I didn't have my tour bus there, but he did.
Yeah.
And he was traveling in Ernest Tubbs' old tour bus.
That's such a Marty Stuart thing to do.
It was cool. And the inside of that bus, it was all done in wood Western cowboy. The handles for the cabinets were actually Colt pistols.
Wow.
It was so cool. And on the inside, autographs on all the cabinets.
Wow.
From everybody, from Ernest Tubb to Hank Snow to Lester Flatt, Earl Scruggs, all these different people.
Wow.
That Marty had worked with, and that Ernest Tubb had worked with back in the day. And he would just, if he brought you on the tour bus, Ernest would just take, hey, sign that wall right there.
Yeah.
Sign that cabinet. So we would sit down and talk in between takes on that set. And that's where we really got to know each other.
Yeah.
And we realized that our love for music was very, very much the same. You know, we both grew up listening to pretty much the same kind of stuff, loving the same kind of music. And our backgrounds were very similar too. So right then and there, because we hit it off so well, I think it was Marty that said, I tell you what, you and I are going to be brothers from now on. And he said, I don't mean just for a little while. He said, you and I are going to be brothers when we're old and fat and nobody wants to hear our music anymore. And we're sitting at home on our rocking chairs doing nothing. He said, we're still going to be brothers. And we have remained that way to this day. It's just one of those great relationships. I love that guy. I don't get to talk to him nearly as much as I used to.
Yeah.
But we stay in touch. And I love that man so much. And he is a big part. I mean, everything that you see in this studio, all these guitars.
Yeah.
A lot of them Marty Stuart turned me on to or found for me.
Yeah.
Or gave me the hey, you need this in your collection.
Yeah.
You need this in your collection. And everything except that guitar you were telling me about, that the one I played on the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
When that first came out, that was a 90th anniversary Harley Davidson Stratocaster.
Uh-huh.
And it's made out of metal. And they only made just very few of those.
Yeah.
And I saw one that came available, and I went in and talked to the guy at the music store about it. And he said, yep, this is how much it is. And I can't remember now how much it was back then, but it was several $1,000s.
Yeah.
And you could buy a brand new Stratocaster, just a plain Stratocaster, for $400-500 back then.
Yeah.
And so I called Marty Stuart and I told him about that guitar.
Uh-huh.
I said, I really want that guitar, man. Don't buy that thing. That thing is a piece of crap. And he said, it's not going to be worth anything. He said, the rest of these guitars, they'll gain in value. But he said, that one won't. So I kept thinking about it, and I thought about how much I love Harley Davidson, how much I love Fender Stratocasters. And then the guy that had that guitar at the music store, wherever it was, called me and said, if you're going to buy that guitar, you better go ahead and buy it. Because Winona Judd came in just 2 days ago, and she's looking at it really hard. And somebody else came in too. I can't remember who it was. Maybe Alan Jackson. Somebody else that liked Harley Davidson motorcycles.
Yeah.
Said, you better go ahead and buy it. I said, it's sold. I'll send you a check right now. So I bought it. Marty Stuart just shook his head. And about 6 months later, those guitars, if you could find them, those guitars were selling for about 5 times what I paid for it.
Wow.
And Marty called me up and he said, well, it shows you what a dumbass I am. What do I know? But yeah, he gave me so many recommendations and gave me so many guitars. over the years.
Yeah.
Just love that guy.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm hoping to have him on soon because the wealth of knowledge and the love for the music and the history that he has is inspiring to me. He really is an inspiration. So if you're listening, Marty, or watching, come on.
Come on over, Marty. The water's fine.
Yeah, there you go. So you collaborated a lot with Marty. You've collaborated with some other great folks. Ray Charles you got to play with. You've played with just so many. Sam Moore, who just passed away, sadly. What a talent with Sam and Dave.
Loved him.
One of the most underrated things that you have put out was Outlaws Like Us, where you got to collaborate with Waylon and Hank Jr. And wasn't Marty on that recording?
I don't remember Marty being on that recording, but I remember I wrote that song specifically with Waylon and Hank Jr. in mind. And I was going to record it regardless. But after the song was finished and I decided that we were going to cut it, I didn't even know how to go about it really, but I knew some people that worked with Hank because he was on the same record label I was on, Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
And I had met Waylon that one time. And so I thought, man, wouldn't it be fantastic? I don't know if they'll do it or not, but wouldn't it be fantastic if I could get Waylon and Hank Jr. both to come in and record this song with me? So we just put the word out to them. And to my surprise, both of them came back and said, absolutely, we'll do that. So we were recording that album out at the old castle, in Franklin. And we got both Waylon and Hank Jr. to agree to come in on the same day. I'd already put my vocals down and recorded the whole thing. And we got them to agree to come in on the same day and do their vocals for that thing. Man, you talk about the music history part. I got my producer at the time, when they came in, they immediately started telling old stories about working together and playing on the road together, because Hank Jr., one of the first gigs that he ever did before he fell off the mountain was opening for Waylon.
Yeah.
Way back when. And then after he fell off the mountain, he was working with Waylon was one of the first gigs that Hank Jr. did after he had all the reconstructive surgery and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Was working with Waylon. So, man, you get those two guys together in a room and let them start telling old stories about being out on the road together and separately.
Yeah.
I told my producer, I said, hit record on that mic. We set up a mic right in the middle of the studio. I said, hit that and record it. And I recorded the whole thing, man. It's just amazing being around those guys. And once again, that's one of those holy crap moments.
Yeah.
Where you sit there and go, I can't believe this is. Somebody pinch me.
Yeah. Do you still have the recording?
I've got it somewhere. I've still got it.
You come across it, send it to me.
Yeah.
I gotta listen.
Oh, it's great. It's great stuff. But those guys came in, and were just a pleasure for me to work with. Of course, I'd heard all the stories, about both Waylon and Hank Jr.
Yeah.
That they could be very difficult to work with. You say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing or ask the wrong thing, and they would light you up in a heartbeat or turn around and just walk out. So I was very mindful of all that. But the fact that both of them were so willing to come in and sing on a song that I wrote basically for them and about them and for me, for them to agree to come in and do something like that. It's like 13-year-old me would have been saying, man, there's no way on this earth that's ever going to happen.
Yeah.
You're crazy.
Yeah.
Here it is. It's just unbelievable. And it's funny that you bring that song back up because my wife, she has on her phone, she constantly listens to music all day, every day. And on her playlist, that song is on her playlist, and she listens to it every single day. And so anytime if I'm around her and that song comes on, she will tell me, she's been telling me for the last 6-8 months, you need to do the song in your shows again. I said, but it wasn't a single. I said, I don't care.
Yeah.
You need to do the song in your shows again. So this year, you make mama happy. That's one thing I learned too.
Yeah.
Make mama happy. So this year, on this tour that we're starting in April, I'm going to be doing Outlaws Like Us again, but I'm going to do it in my solo acoustic set in the middle of the show where I send the band off stage and I play like 3 or 4 songs just by myself.
Oh, yeah.
That's where I'm going to put it.
Yeah, I'm going to have to come to the show because I want to see it. That's one of my favorite songs, and I just never thought that it got the love that it deserved. You know, a lot of folks don't recognize it when you say the name. I'm like, man, that's one of the coolest songs.
And they also don't realize there was a video for it.
I didn't know there was a video for it.
There was a video that we shot for it. We shot a video of Hank and Waylon when they showed up at the studio. And we've got them singing in the studio on the microphones with the headphones on. And the whole deal, going back and forth, laughing with each other. There is a video out there for it somewhere.
Yeah.
That you can find. Somebody sent me Somebody sent me one of those not too long ago.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, that's a great reminder.
Yeah. I'll dig it up.
Yeah.
I had a story, and I want to make sure that I get this name right because this guy's a hero. Let me see. Will Chesney. Now, my friend Taylor Swade, who is a really big fan of yours, told me this story and kind of turned me on to it. So thank you, Taylor, for that. But I'm sure you know the story. Will Chesney was a soldier that would go over in Afghanistan and those places and do raids. And he had a dog. And before or after every raid, when they would leave, he'd put in his earbuds and listen to "It's a Great Day to Be Alive."
Yes.
And then his dog passed away and he couldn't listen to it anymore. It made him too sad. But then he was in on the raid, Bin Laden. And
with Rob.
Yep. He goes in on the raid with Bin Laden, and when they're leaving, it's more dangerous than going in because now they know they're there.
Yes.
And so these guys get on this helicopter thinking we might get shot down and die. And he said, well, he had his new dog that went on the raid sitting in his lap. He said, well, if I'm going to go down, I'm going to do it right. And he put his earbuds in and he listened to "It's a Great Day to Be Alive." I get chills just telling that story. It's so incredible. And how does that make you feel?
It shows you the power of music.
Yeah.
Anytime I hear stories like that, which, of course, that makes me extremely proud.
Yeah.
To be involved in something like that. But it lets you know that music is not just something that, people just tap their toe to or dance to or, whatever. Music, I've been saying this my whole life, my whole career. Music becomes the soundtrack of your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can hear certain songs to this day. I can hear certain songs and it takes me back to high school or being a kid, a certain place than I was when I heard that song for the first time. And it takes me back to I know exactly what I was doing. I know exactly where I was when I heard that song for the first time. Yeah. And it becomes the soundtrack to your life.
Yeah.
I talked about when I did that Eagles tribute record,
Mm.
I got to tell those guys to their faces, I said, man, I wore out about 4 or 5 8-track tapes of Eagles' greatest hits
Yeah.
when I was in high school. When I first had learned how to drive, 16 years old, 15, 16 years old, first I had learned how to drive. And man, all those great songs like Best of My Love, Desperado,
Mm.
Lion Eyes, that stuff was playing in the 69 Rambler, which was my first car, playing in the background the first time I ever went on a date, first time I ever kissed a girl, first time, all of these great things. I said, your music was the soundtrack of my life, because I can place exactly certain songs. I can place I can tell you exactly where I was when I heard that.
Yeah.
And how listening to it over and over and over again became your go-to song,
Yeah.
It just shows you how powerful music really is.
Yeah.
And how especially that, for me, the old stuff that I grew up on, it's just it's more than just a song
Yeah.
that you liked. It's a part of your life. It's woven into the fabric of your life. And those certain songs that bring back certain memories of things that were really important, in this whole scheme of my life, things that were extremely important. And it's sort of like a touchstone. That's something that you can, oh yeah, that's the song that took me back to that particular point in my life where I realized I was falling in love, or I was going to get married, or we were going to have kids, or all these different things, big monumental things. There's a song that goes along with each one of those monumental moments in your life. And I think that's pretty much the same way for just about anybody.
Yeah.
They can tell you that song, here's when I was listening to it.
Yeah.
It was when all these other great things were going on, or dangerous things, or scary things, or whatever it was. I could relate.
Yeah.
And it just makes you feel, me personally, it makes me feel small in the world when you realize that you created something that so many people used as inspiration.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Well, I remember years ago riding around and listening to I'm Gonna Be Somebody I would put it on repeat and listen to it over and over again, because it just made me feel like, one day I'm gonna get where I'm wanting to go, And I'm not ashamed to admit either that I made Grayson listen to it about 10.
It was stories like that. And then when you realize, when you have people that come up, I think probably one of the greatest comments or stories that I heard about people listening to my music. First of all, before we get away from it, Tracy Lawrence.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know the Tracy Lawrence story about I'm Gonna Be Somebody?
No, I'm not.
Tracy Lawrence came to one of my shows when he was still living, I think he was still living in Arkansas, and came to one of my shows, and he said he was like that right down front.
Mm.
And he was thinking about going to Nashville, thinking about, having a career in music. And according to what he told in interviews, he said that I was looking right at him.
Mm.
And he said, when I got to that part, I'm going to be somebody, he said he put his fist up in the air and said something to the effect of, you're dang right. That's exactly what I'm going to do. And he said he made his mind up right then and there.
Wow.
That he was going to go to Nashville and try to break into the music industry. And that song inspired him. I think one of the greatest stories I ever heard about any music that I ever made, right after we released Anymore, I got a letter from a lady who told me that her daughter had been in a intensive care with and would not respond to anybody. I don't know. I think she had been in an accident, but she wasn't responding to anybody. And before the accident, I was one of her favorites. And so when she was in a coma in the hospital, they would play my music in the background occasionally. And she would maybe, I'm a little vague on this, on the part leading up to that. Before Anymore came out, she would listen to my music, and even though she was in a coma, she would maybe move a hand or move a finger and maybe turn her head slightly to the side or whatever. But when Anymore came out, she told me in this letter, they played that song in her hospital room. And when that song came on, for the first time in months, her daughter opened her eyes and came out of that coma.
Wow.
And once again, man, I mean, I read that letter and the tears were just flowing.
Yeah.
Because you realize, man, it was just a song, but it wasn't just a song. It was something that meant something to somebody, so much so that it brought them out of a coma. And of course, I didn't have anything to do with it. You know, I feel like when things like that happen, that's all God.
Yeah.
Every bit of that.
Yeah.
But the fact that your music, I believe God uses us sometimes in ways that we don't even realize.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly what happened on that song.
Yeah.
But that was one of the most incredible stories. Isn't it amazing to think about the fact that a song can have that kind of an effect on people?
Yeah.
To me, it's just amazing, just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it's the power of music.
Yeah. It's so cool when something you do impacts somebody, and you never, when you're doing it, you never think. I put out a video and I got a message. This has been a couple of months ago from an artist. And he said, man, I just want to let you know that I watched that video and it really got me to pick up my guitar again. My baby daughter died a year or two ago, and I just hadn't been able to pick it up. And he said, I watched the video that you did, and it's inspired me to pick up and get after it again. And I'm like, wow, I'd never, you don't expect something like that when you're making it. And when you hear those stories, it's like, what I'm doing serves a purpose far bigger than I ever realized.
That's exactly right.
And it's so incredible to see art go out and do that and
100%
help people. And
it is just amazing, and you think about all of the wonderful stories that you hear. And I'm sure in my case, the stories I've heard are probably just a drop in the bucket, because that's another thing you don't realize. I don't realize is how many people you've touched over the years. You people that you never met, never got to talk to. Some people that may have never even seen you in concert.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yes.
When you think about that, and it makes you feel special, and at the same time, it makes you feel like, man, it's a great big world out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people in this world.
Absolutely. You know what else is incredible? And you don't give yourself the credit you deserve on this, I don't think. You got the Eagles back together.
You've probably heard me tell this story. I really don't like taking credit for any of that because I don't think it was an accident.
Yeah.
It was
the best accident they ever had.
It was totally an accident. I was asked to be a part of that tremendous album, the Eagles tribute album. I was asked to record a song for that album, and I think I was one of the last people to be asked, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Because when they asked me, they said, would you do a song, an Eagles song for this album? Sure. Man, I'd love that. I grew up on the Eagles.
Yeah.
Hey, I'd like to do Lion Eyes. Somebody else is already recording that. Well, how about Desperado? Now, Clint Black's already got that one. Well, what about this one? What about that one? Every song I wanted to do was already taken. And so I thought, dang, what song could I do? And my lawyer at the time, John Mason, I think he's the one that suggested, hey, man, why don't you do Take It Easy? That was their first single that was a number one. That was their first number one. And I thought, yeah, I like that song. Okay, I'll record it. Recorded it. Didn't really think too much more about it. And then several months later, they sent me an advanced copy of the album. And I thought, man, I was listening to everybody on there, from Trisha to Clint to Diamond Rio, everybody. I thought everybody on that album did such a fabulous job. And then one day I get a call, and they said, from Irving Azoff's office, and they said, we want your song to be the first single off this album. Wow, what an honor that is. Man, that's great. I'm over the moon.
Yeah.
And then they said, and we want to shoot a video. What do you think would be, what would you like to do in a video? And I said, oh, now you're putting pressure on me, because everybody did such a fantastic job on this album. It's a standout album. It's going to do extremely well. I just know it is.
Yeah.
So if we're going to do a video for the first single, man, it's got to be something special. And they said, well, what do you have in mind? And I'm thinking off the top of my head. I said, I don't know. Why don't we see if we can get the Eagles to come in and do the video? Let's get the Eagles back together. Dead silence on the other end of the phone. And then we're on this conference call. So somebody on the other end, after that momentary silence that was probably only 10 seconds long, I hear somebody start laughing. And then everybody starts laughing. And I thought, what in the world is so funny? Because I didn't know anything about, I knew the Eagles had broken up, but I didn't know any of the details about why they broke up or the things that they had said since they broke up.
Yeah.
I had no clue. So the call ended, and they called me back. I can't remember, maybe a couple or 3 days later. They called me back from Irving Azoff's office, and they said, that thing you said the other day, we're not going to get involved in that. But we've decided that if you want to pursue that, we're going to let you make the phone call and present it to the two main guys. And I said, okay, I don't know how they're going to react. I don't know how they're going to respond. They may cuss me out and hang up the phone. I don't have a clue.
Yeah.
But I have to at least try. So I made the phone calls to Glenn Frey first. And he said, well, you know what? This album is not really about the Eagles. It's about you guys doing our music. And he said, if you want to do a video with us included, he said, I'll do it if Don will do it. And so I said, okay. If we could get Don to do it, you say you'll do it, right? Yeah, I'll do it. So the next call was to Don Henley. And I didn't tell Don that I had already talked to Glenn Frey first. I made it sound like he was my first phone call.
Yeah, let it be his idea.
And sure enough, surprisingly, he said, well, if you can get Glenn to say he'll do it, I'll do it. And I knew if we could get Glenn Frey and Don Henley, the rest of the guys would come in, or at least that's what I was praying for.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it was in December, right before Christmas time. And we had it all set up to shoot that video in East LA in a little club. And the morning of the shoot, everybody showed up except for Don Henley. Don was not there. And 20 minutes goes by, half an hour goes by, 45 minutes goes by, an hour goes by, still no Don Henley. And I thought, oh no, this thing's going to fall apart before it even gets off the ground. And just about an hour or so into it, car pulls up, Don gets out, got caught in traffic. And that was a magical, magical day. And the funny thing about it was everybody got along. Everybody got along great. It was wonderful. And we had so many of those scenes where we're just shooting pool or, walking together down the alley and, pretending like we're getting arrested by the cops, getting frisked by the cops.
Yeah.
And I just remember telling those guys as we're walking along, I said, man, you guys created the soundtrack to my teenage years, soundtrack to my life.
Yeah.
And I told Don Henley and Glenn Frey, I said, in my humble opinion, I said, this is just me. I think you two guys have meant more to the world of music than anybody since Lennon and McCartney. Both of their eyes kind of popped open, and then they looked at each other and they broke out in these big grins and started laughing. Because I don't know if anybody had ever told them that or not. But as a fan,
Yeah.
I just wanted them to know how important their music had been to me.
Right.
And just to be part of something so special, had no idea whatsoever that anything like that could ever happen. And then to be later on to have people say, oh, guess what? Since you did that video, the Eagles are doing a new album and they're going back out on tour again. It's called the Hell Freezes Over Tour. And I still, to this day, I don't like taking credit for that because of the fact that it was a group effort. If I hadn't have been invited to be a part of that album, if I hadn't have been asked to do the first single and shoot a video for it, and I just said the first thing that came to my head, it's got to be special.
Yeah.
How do you make it special? Well, let's get the Eagles back to. I had no clue whatsoever. And once again, those guys, they could not have been nicer. And the slightest little thing could have gone wrong with that whole situation. That, you know, who knows what would have happened.
Yeah.
But I was fortunate to be at the right place at the right time, involved in the right project.
Yeah. Yeah. And thankfully you did. Is they went on strong after that for many years, and now they got Vince with them, and they're still going strong. Yeah. Back in the 90s, you did a trilogy of videos that terrified a bunch of young kids like me of going on a dock in the water. And I read that really got you involved with the vets, though.
It did.
Doing things with the veterans. And why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
I myself had never served, but I had a lot of people that I knew that had, and I had a chance to meet a lot of these veterans, and to me, all of these veterans, I loved hearing the stories. One of my favorite things is to listen to stories about World War II veterans and Vietnam veterans and all these other veterans over the years. But when we did Any More and they wanted me to play that part of a disabled American veteran, first of all, I was excited about doing it, but I was also scared to do it.
Yeah.
Because the video, they wanted me to play that character. And then they told me we want to shoot it in the Alvin C. York Veterans Clinic in Murfreesboro, Tennessee.
Yeah.
And everybody in the video, with the exception of you and the girl that plays your wife and one other actor, everybody else that's in that video is going to be actual veterans that are either patients or staff members at that veterans hospital.
Wow.
And I remember to this day, clear as day, what it was like going in that first morning. Because I thought, man, all these veterans are going to take one look at me in that wheelchair, and they're going to say, who in the hell does this guy think he is, trying to play one of us when he's never served, he's never been a part of any military outfit, he doesn't know anything about what we've gone through. They're going to hate me, and they're going to either want to try to whip my ass or throw me out, or both.
Yeah.
And I remember the first scene that we shot was the scene in the basketball court. At the end, we shot from back to front. So that was the first scene that we shot. And when I'm sitting there in that wheelchair with the guitar, And all of a sudden, I found myself surrounded by all of these people that were patients in that hospital. I sat down that morning. I walked in and sat down in that wheelchair, and they had all the lights and the cameras set, and they said, okay, we're just going to do a dry run just for blocking. And all of these veterans start coming in on crutches and in wheelchairs and all these different things. And I thought, I'm sitting there in that chair, and I thought, oh no, here it comes. They're going to wear me out. And much to my surprise, I found out that they were extremely nice, extremely polite, extremely helpful. They told me how to move my legs to how I would be sitting in a wheelchair, where my legs would actually be, showed me how to move around in the wheelchair. And above all, they told me how happy they were that somebody was there to tell their story.
Yeah.
Man, that just moved me beyond belief.
Yeah.
And so later on, several weeks later, when the video was done, we went back and we premiered it at that same VA hospital that we'd shot it in.
Mm.
And I just remember I'm up on a stage, and there's a big screen behind me, and I'm off to the side. And when they started playing that video on that screen, I'm looking out in the audience at all of these people that were in, a lot of them were in the video.
Right.
And others that weren't. And man, I don't think I saw a single person that didn't have a tear rolling down their cheek.
Mm.
And it just moved me so much. And so I went back and I told my management at the time, I said, I want to get involved with veterans issues, and I want to get involved with the veterans. And they placed calls to a bunch of different veterans organizations in Washington, D.C., and the DAV, the Disabled American Veterans, the people, they were the first ones that really responded back. And they told me about an annual retreat that they had every year in Colorado, where they bring all of these disabled American veterans out, and they have them stay for a week, and they have them ski, and they're involved in all of these different things.
Yeah.
And they said, would you come out and play a concert there, and also come out and meet with the veterans and talk with them and just kind of tell them, what it is that inspires you? And I said, man, I'd love to do that. Mm. And then somebody came up with the idea of filming it for a video. And so we ended up releasing a video of that whole thing. And man, that was just amazing to me to be able to sit down with these actual veterans and realize, how much that music meant to them and how much that they really appreciated the fact that I was willing to go out and be involved in something like that and really highlight them, just kind of stand in the background and really make the focus of the video about the veterans.
Right.
And not me.
Yeah.
And that was extremely successful, and it just sort of started snowballing from that point. I wanted to work on more and more projects with veterans.
Yeah.
I ended up getting to be the celebrity chairman and the celebrity spokesperson for the Disabled American Veterans Association.
Wow.
And I ended up doing that for 4 years in a row, traveling all over the place and working with veterans, talking with veterans, promoting veterans.
That's awesome.
And then when that 4 years ended, I had an opportunity to do that same job for 2 more years with now I'm drawing a blank. I had a chance to work with the DAV first, and then I had a chance to work with the VFW for 2 more years in that same capacity. And my love for veterans, it just all comes from my experiences with veterans, my respect for veterans, my appreciation for veterans.
Yeah.
And it just mushroomed from there, blossomed from there.
Yeah.
And I try to take a little bit of time out of every single show that I do to get veterans to stand up, let us recognize them, and thank them for their service.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times, once they come back from being involved in these dangerous situations, some of them horribly injured,
right,
to come back and be ignored. And that's one of the things that I've always said. We don't do near enough in this country, I don't think, for our veterans. We need to do more. And I try to bring more attention to the veterans. And the funny thing about veterans is, talk about not taking credit for doing amazing things. I don't think our veterans get near enough credit.
Yeah.
Or stand up and take near enough credit.
Yeah.
For the things that they do for us. And I think it's important. And even when I ask people to stand up in our concerts, a lot of them are very reluctant.
Yeah.
And they're kind of looking around and seeing if anybody else is going to stand up before they stand up.
Yeah.
Those are the people I absolutely admire and look up to.
Yeah. Don Goodman, who wrote Old Red and Angels Among Us and Dixie Road, he's part of a nonprofit called Freedom Sings, and he'll go and he'll invite other songwriters to write a song with the vets about their experience, or they have one vet for each deal, and then they'll actually take it in and cut a demo on it. And I got to be a part of that last month, thanks to Don, and being in the room with those guys and just hearing them tell their stories amongst each other, I felt inferior. I felt like, man, these are the heroes here. And it's just, I have so much respect. My dad is a veteran, and a lot of my family members, I have so much respect for our veterans, and I'm with you 100%. They don't get the credit they deserve, because they deserve all of it.
When I first started working with the DAV, they told me that we were spending, at that particular time, and that was back in the 90s, we were spending more money in the federal government. We were spending more money testing the effects of cow emissions on the ozone layer than we were on veterans issues and veterans health care.
Yeah, there should never be a homeless veteran in this country.
That's exactly right. That's the way I feel.
Yeah.
100%. So I just have so much respect for them, and I'm going to continue to push for more money, more recognition, more honoring of our veterans, because they are so important. My youngest son is constantly telling me that he wants to go into the military, and I honor, so many of his cousins have gone into the military over the years.
Yeah.
And every single one of them, of course, you worry about them, but I don't think that there's a single thing that anybody can do in this country that is more praiseworthy and honor-worthy than signing up to put your life on the line for this country and the freedoms that we enjoy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we've been running I ain't even been paying attention. We've talked so much country music, and I feel like we're just crashing the circle. We're going to have to do this again.
Oh, I'd love to do it again.
We're going to have to do this again, but I want to thank you so much again for inviting us in here and all that you've contributed to country music and the reverence you have for the history and just allowing us to come in your house and your studio here. And thank you.
Hey man, you're more than welcome. And we will definitely do it again.
Yes, sir.
I mean, it's I can't tell you again how much I appreciate your honoring the history of this business.
Yeah.
There's a tremendous amount of history out there that needs to be told. And obviously you're finding out that a lot of people are very interested in that history.
Yes.
They want to know about it.
It blew my mind, Travis. Honestly, I tell people all the time, I thought I was weird because I liked country music history so much. I'd hear a song and I needed to know who wrote it and why.
Yes.
That just interested, because then you appreciate the song just tenfold when you know why. And so when I started doing it and I got 1,000 followers, like, well, there's 1,000 more weirdos. And then we're almost at 1 million across all platforms.
Isn't that
now.
amazing?
And I'm like, maybe I'm not a weirdo.
Shows you're doing something right.
Folks love the history and they love the stories behind the song. We didn't even talk about any of the stories behind yours. We'll do that next time. But thank you for doing this, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you.
Yes, sir.
Take care of yourself.